Welcome to all those attending by Zoom, by Facebook, or watching the recorded version of this meeting at a later time. We are glad to have you. I'm Laurie Werner Castillo. I'm the first vice president of the Utah Valley Technology and Genealogy Group, and I'll be conducting today. Our opening prayer will be by my husband, Jerry Castillo.
Our Father in heaven, we're thankful for the opportunity to participate in this meeting together and talk about military records. We're grateful for our presenter and pray that thy spirit might be with her. Bless her as she presents her theme and topics. May we all be gain some new understanding about research in this area of our ancestors' lives. We pray for thy spirit to be with us in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. All right. So this is our November 2024 meeting of the Utah Valley Technology and Genealogy Group. Today, our main presentation and our second hour presentation will be given by Marilyn Thomsen, who is the editor of our newsletter. And the title of her first presentation is Military Research When and Where. And the description of this is thinking of exploring our ancestors' military records. Military records are an important USA source of information. They're especially valuable when researching families before the 1850 census. Marilyn will discuss military records, how they are organized, and what you can expect to discover. Also, the major repositories of records and search strategies will be included. Marilyn's bio, to tell you a little bit about her, she has been the editor of Tagology, the Utah Valley Technology Group's newsletter for 10 years. Wow, time flies, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
She graduated with a BA from BYU and in 2005 with a family history focus in U.S. Southern research. She was a volunteer on the U.S.-Canada floor at the Family Search Library in Salt Lake and worked on other projects. She was director at 3 family search centers in Utah. After completing national DAR training, she enjoyed lineage research for new applicants. And during her BYU internship at the National Archive Regional Center in Georgia, she rambled through courthouses and cemeteries of her Southern roots. With her husband, Richard, she visited the homes, parishes, and archives of her ancestors in Denmark, the Isle of Man, and England. Marilyn loves to put flesh on the bones of her ancestors and won BYU's Family History of the Year Award for histories focusing on her Utah pioneer ancestors. Her enthusiasm when teaching comes because she really loves helping others find their roots. Her husband, Richard, shares a passion for digging up dead relatives and connecting them to living relatives. And we will turn the time over now to Marilyn Thomsen. Thank you, Marilyn.
Thank you. So participants that are live and current, I would love to have you send in notes, and we're monitoring the Facebook site and also those that are joining us here in the Zoom meeting and so I would love to answer those, and if you have something you would like me to go back over or site you would like me to visit, at the end I will have time. This course that I'm teaching this hour is followed up by a second one of state research. They are connected, and so some of the information I'm giving in this first one, I won't revisit in the second one, but they are closely tied together. So I wanted you to know that. This is, okay, let me see how it's not going. Okay, where I need to, there.
Oh,
okay.
Marilyn, I forgot to mention to everybody to look in the chat to get your handout. There's where the link for the handout is.
Thank you, Laurie. Yes, the handout has links to the sites that I'll be talking about. So, Veterans Day, this is a super opportunity this weekend to talk about this, and part of it is that Ancestry and Family Search and MyHeritage will release military collections. One of the most exciting ones recently is that Ancestry's released a military collection for the service records in England. They've been working with the National Archives in Kew and digitizing those collections. And so I'm really, really excited for those. It is an exciting event for especially the Brits to be able to start looking at those records with Kew. Of course, they don't have to travel quite as far as we do here in the United States, but that is fun. And the nice thing about this weekend is often these collections at MyHeritage and Footnote will be free to people who don't have subscriptions. Okay, just a minute. This is not advancing. Okay, so let me just mention, the reason I really love military records is while I was at BYU, I was trying to locate the Civil War records for, this is Hezekiah Hunt. Even though I followed all the research guides and I went to Salt Lake and BYU and everything, I could not find any indication that he served in the Civil War. But my mom had talked and been back there and talked to relatives, and the sword that he had, and he died and was buried in his uniform, and they all swore up and down he served in the military. And then I went to his graveyard, and this little cross by his headstone indicates that it's a service medal. Whenever you see that next to a grave, it means they were a veteran of the Civil War. So finally, I went to do my internship at the National Archive in Georgia, it's the Morrill, Georgia. It's a branch there. And again, they didn't have anything on Hezekiah Hunt, but I walked across the parking lot over to the Georgia State Archive. And I says, oh, I'm looking for Hezekiah Hunt to see if he served in the Civil War. And they whipped out this index. And they said, oh, yeah, his wife Dovey got a pension, and it outlines his service. And they pulled out all kinds of records that were not in the National Archive. And that was a real eye-opener to me to realize that, first of all, you need to look for other people's names. Her pension, Dovey, is the one who really had the information about his service. The second thing is he served in the local militia in Georgia. And so his pension as a Confederate came through the state. It isn't a federal pension. And the third thing is Dovey's pension lasted until 1914. Hezekiah Hunt was born in 1810. So she was getting money 104 years after he was born. And so I learned to extend my research for records for a lot longer. So this presentation is about knowing when and where you're going to look for military records. It really is a very important source of research for genealogists. This little chart that is here shows all the types of information that you're going to find in military records. There's service, pension, bounty land, draft records, cemetery records, soldier homes, veterans, lineage societies, military biographies. All of these things will have different pieces of information for the genealogists. And sometimes we say, oh, I know when he lived, or I know when he died, but to get a physical description, to be able to get the parents, to get to know marriage dates and things like that, those can be what you're going to get. So first of all, you need to make an ancestor list. And so there have always been wars. everyone has lived through a period of time when there was a war. And people served in the military when there isn't a war. But you need to look for the records that will be sorted by the period of time of a war. Okay, so here's a chart that has some dates on when the wars were, beginning and end. And the next thing you do is you look at possible relatives, but not just your direct line relative. You want to look at their fathers, their brothers, and their uncles. To make a list of when and where these people served. It may be in an uncle's pension file that you're going to find the name of the father, or the family Bible record was sent in to prove a marriage. So don't be narrow in thinking just my ancestor. So this is an example of a good list. This shows James and his brothers, okay? A little chart showing when they were born, what their age was, and when their children were born. Let me just mention here, often say in Family Search, it'll have an alert. It'll say, oh, there's a gap in the children. Gap in children being born during a war is often an important clue that he was away in the military. And when he comes home, then there's more children that are being born. So just put that little feather in the back of your hat and be aware that that could be. Another important thing to remember is that my brother's father is my father's father. My cousin's grandfather is my grandfather. My nephew's father is my brother. I still remember I was sitting there looking at a document, and I says, well, now I know who her sister's father is, but how do I find out who her father is? And then it went, ding, oh, wait. So do take time, make those little charts, organize yourself, and get ready for a great adventure. So the next clue to finding military record is you need to know the name of the company and the regiment of service. And on this slide, I have a cute headstone. It says, Charles, 3 U.S. Army. That doesn't really help you. The Special Service Forces in the U.S. Army, it doesn't tell you his unit, doesn't tell you when he served. And the name of the company and the regiment of service is the key to the records. This little chart kind of shows you how the Army is organized. And you have to remember there's an Army, there's a Navy. We have 7 branches of service now. But even back in the colonial times, a person who's serving in the Navy, his records won't be in the Army. And if they're cavalry, oh yeah, the cavalry, you're changing horses midstream. So this is how, when you go into a pension record, the person may name his captain. Well, his captain is part of a regiment, so then he'll name the regiment commander. And then the regiment commander is under a brigade, and then a brigade is under a division, and a division is under a corps, and then a corps is under the Army. So you need to learn where the regiment is so that you can learn where the records are. Okay, so my screen slide I don't think is changing. Okay, I am so sorry. Whoa, this is the James and his brother. Okay, brother's brother, this is the slide of Charles. I'm clicking in the wrong place. Okay, and then this is the regiments. Okay, they're not thinking.
So
okay.
We didn't get to see all those charts that you were talking about.
Okay, so those charts are in my handout. I am apologetic. I am an amateur at all of this. So we'll go back really quick. Okay, so this is the military record selection table. This is the years, and this will be in your handout. This is a chart that shows how you would show, when they were born and what years their children were born and the gaps of years. This chart shows, James and his brothers, and then this is the one that says my brother's father. Okay, and then this is the key is the company, and then this shows the brigades. I will start clicking on the right thing now. So an ancestor's company and regiment can be found in these places. First of all, you're going to start with family records that show a military service. The next is county histories, and I'm going to talk more about that in the next presentation. The next is websites that you can go to, and there's something called the reports of the adjutant general of the state from which they served, and those may tell you the regiment. We're going to skip. Okay, let me go down. Okay. Ancestors who didn't serve could also be in draft records, which are not considered military records. When I was at the National Archive, they would get upset with me for calling draft records military records, because they are not. They're congressional records. It's a report to Congress who's able to serve. The other thing they may be in is in pensions. And pensions, again, as we saw with Dovey, she didn't serve in the military, but her husband, his unit was named in it. Also, there'll be affidavits for the uncles or brothers or fellow soldiers that can tell, oh yeah, he served, he was with me. One of the blessings of new is we are getting more and more names coming into indexes as a result. Fold 3 is a great example of that. There's also family benefits. Carol Hill was mentioning how she was curious why her grandmother was receiving pension benefits, and found a huge story about her uncle and his service. And then lineage organizations often will have names and tell you how people are linked. With lineage organizations, remember, it doesn't just include the person that served, but they're talking about their descendants. And so that can help you to learn more information about them. So now we're going to talk about the types of records, how I'm going to organize this presentation. At NARA, they would tell us there are pre-service records, the draft and the physical records. And then there's service records, and then there's post-service records. And that's how they see things in the way that they're organized. And so service records, while they're living in that, then those are really all they really call military records. The post-service records, the pensions and the lineage organizations, go into another whole category for them. So in your handout, you want to look for links to that you want to bookmark. You should learn how to use Control D to add a website to a bookmark so that you can keep going back to sites that will help you. And then also the Family History Guide is helpful to teach you how to use military records, and it is for not just the US, but a guide has many lessons in military records in addition to the United States. Okay, okay, we'll go on to the, this is the Family History Guide. If you click at the top where it says countries, then you'll see a drop down of all of the different countries. And then when you go into the country, then you'll go into the military, and then they have walk you through the different types of records and have some really good links on to help you to understand records and how they work. Okay. My favorite website to use is Military Indexes, and Military Indexes, the reason I love it is because they keep the links up to date. Even Family Searches Wiki, I go in so often and find dead links or cobwebs, and I have to go and research the Wayback Machine to be able to find where that site is. But he does a really good job of adding more and that. And you have to learn how it's organized. And so the top slide shows how they are organized by the war. Okay, and then as you scroll down, it will go to state sites. And we'll talk about how the state sites are organized and what you can find in there in the next presentation. This is a Family Search is organization of military guides and military records. And the way the catalog at Family Search is organized is they have wars, individual wars, and their links aren't always as good here. You can see this one, it says U.S. military, and that's the next thing you need to learn about the Family Search's organization is that it's according to their record levels. And so there is a whole federal helps for federal records, but then there are state military records, and then there are county military records. And so you need to look at every single level for information to be able to find your military records. Okay, so this is for an example. See how the state military records, they're organized by the wars and the battles, different battles. You can go in and look, and then there'll be record types, the cemeteries, the prisoner of wars, the service records, and things like that. And this is kind of one of my first go-tos, just to learn how these work. Okay, so it also, let's see, it will include records for the state, but also it goes even deeper. It will go down into city and county and repository records. This is an example of Richmond, Georgia, okay? And so they have maps, but you'll see they have military records, 3 types of military records. But then if you'll look above, it says places within Georgia that are included in Richmond, and up's going to come Fort Gordon. And Fort Gordon has its own set of records. Hezbollah, those are cemeteries in Turn Hills, and they will have military records. And so make sure when you're using that library catalog that you are using all levels, not just the city, but also county records. This is an example of the Richmond County, Georgia. I should have had this slide before the other one. And they'll start out, you'll see over at the side, it'll take you right down to military records. And so that's what you'll want to look for. There are other sites for the individual wars that you'll want to look at. One good site that was created by the government is called the Soldiers and Sailors Database. Because the Civil War encompassed like 3/5 of the entire nation serving in the war, identifying those men became a huge project. And they went through all of the different levels and types of records and tried to create this database. And it is really a helpful site. And you can see it's organized soldiers, sailors, and regiments. In this database, it has a regimental history. And the reason you would go to a regimental history is when you find out what wars or what battles that regiment served in, then you have more information about your ancestor and what he experienced, and you're able to look at the people who might have histories of that regiment and personal histories and personal experiences that will expand your information. These regimental histories are also important because regiments were formed locally. And so your ancestor probably served with his cousins, he probably served with he could be his brothers. Often I will see brothers that died in the same regiment. One brother came home, one brother didn't. So this is an example of the 49th Regimental history, okay? And so this is my ancestor, George W. Fallon. He was in the 49th Regiment. Okay, and then I took that regimental history and I put it into Google. And the U.S. Gen Archives had a list of these members from Taliaferro County. And these are my ancestors' cousins. And it tells when they died and where they died and when they were killed. And so this is putting those bones and those stories that your ancestor saw. And this kind of information is gathered locally. But we used a federal site to be able to dig down and get into those local records of information about this ancestor. Okay, so I want to go on now to talk about these pre-service records. Okay, so when soldiers were called up, often especially colonial and revolutionary and Indian wars, it was because they needed soldiers, and so they had a little local militia. And these are the first censuses that were taken, even before our early federal censuses. And it also, these militia rolls helped you to know how old your ancestor was. It'll give you a year, because when they first show up on the militia rolls, then you know they're of age. And that age will be specific to the particular state where they served. Pre-service records, for example, in the 1812 federal census, it identified men who were of military age. That's one of the columns. Draft registration are pre-service records. Physicals are pre-service records. So those are some things you need to look for. So Ancestry has an entire collection of military records, and when you go into this first site of military records and put your information in, this will be searching databases of federal. Okay, it's not going to go into the states, but you can narrow it by the categories and the actions, and this is really helpful. Ancestry has done a lot of work, and I like their search engines. I like how you're able to narrow the collection down. Family Search similarly has these similar databases that have been created for their records. Family Search is free, Ancestry is not, but except this month, there are some that are. Okay, so the militia rolls, we've talked about that. Okay, we talked about that. Okay. Draft registration records. We think of World War II, World War I, draft registration records, but actually the Civil War, Confederate, they had draft registrations, and those will be organized by the state. So, for example, Pennsylvania needed to gather up some soldiers, and so they'll have their own draft registration collection that they have. Okay, the next thing is service records. Remember, that's in the middle. And so documents relating to events affecting these people during their duty. Service records will be part of the muster rolls while they're in service. They would muster to see how many men they had to go into battle. They would muster all the men to see who was sick. They would muster to see who was going to get paid. And those pay receipts are really an important record to follow. We'll talk about that a little bit more. No matter what period of time, service records are very common, okay? And those are some of the events that your ancestor experienced. What happened in the U.S. is that these service records, because people wanted to claim benefits such as pension, they took and they organized these service records into folders, and they are very good folders. And so there's an index to service records, but you can't stop just at the index. You need to keep digging deeper and find all of these other records that are considered part of the service records. So service records, because they were being indexed by the military, the group of people, or the pension office, and that they look the same, even though they are different. So it doesn't matter which war it's in, the service records will kind of have the same information because they went through the same experiences. They enlisted, they were given equipment, they had to muster, they were on payrolls, they had leave, they have casualty reports, and then they were discharged or they died. And Laurie Castillo just reminded me that their discharge actually occurred in the local county. And so that's what you're looking for. So this is an example of family search. This is Georgia Civil War service records for Confederate soldiers. And you could put my name in there, my ancestor's name in there, and he's not going to come up because this is federal records, okay? And you have to remember during the Civil War, the states are the ones that kept the Confederate records and gave the Confederate pension. And so this will be Union registers, okay? So, but this is a service record on Ancestry, and this is Family Search. Both Family Search and Ancestry will link to Fold 3. Okay, and Fold 3 is who the National Archive has given permission to go ahead and index the service records. And this is what a service record will look like. First of all, the outside is a cover. Okay, and this looks like a little teeny card, but it's actually a folder. And on the outside of the folder, it will tell, on page 1, it'll tell what their name is. And so inside are these little cards. Well, they're not little, but they're pretty cards, and they tell what is happening on the day, okay? When they mustered, or if they're sick, or if they were issued equipment. And so let me show you the first part. This is the day when he enlisted, okay, and where he enlisted. So he enlisted in Crawfordville, Georgia. Crawfordville is in Taliaferro, and he enlisted on the same day as those other soldiers that you saw in there that were his cousins. Okay, and then down at the bottom it says was he present or absent? He was present, but he was sick in his quarters. George eventually, you'll see in the next one, he died of typhoid fever. But then you can take and you can denote, what time period, when did this happen, where did it happen. So this was he was in a general hospital at Point Lookout Mountain, Maryland. And so that little piece of information tells me I can go and find photographs, because the Civil War was the first real war of photos. And I can find pictures of soldiers who were at the hospital at Mount Point, Maryland, and you'll have some additional information to be able to share with your family that will be there. Inside of these service records, you're also going to come across typed up letters that kind of summarize what happened to this person. And these are really helpful. They're easier to read than pensions or other things, and they're really accurate. And often you have an expert looking at the records and they have come to conclusions. So for example, one may have a conclusion that no other children are mentioned, or his marriage date is not included. And so this will just mention evidence that they have looked for, but there is no record that's going to give that to you. Okay. So now remember that site that I told you to bookmark. Okay, so this is the Revolutionary War indexes, and so it has links to all kinds of sites that are federal, but you need to scroll down, okay, and see this is North Carolina. and it's going to show you the types of information that are there. And so that's why it's so valuable, because this is where you're going to go and pay vouchers. We'll talk about this a little bit more later, but these pay vouchers are really valuable. So one thing that is missing from that website is the colonial records. It starts with the Revolutionary War, because that's when our country started. But military records didn't start with the Revolutionary War. There were wars before. And those records are going to be either in the state or they may be in the British Army records, housed in the Public Record Office in London. And you're saying, well, Marilyn, why do you need to talk about that? And that is because this period of time has so few records. Anything that is saved can be that little extra piece of information that can help you to research your ancestors in this time period. Okay. All right. So colonial service records, those are going to be in the state. You're going to look for militia musters, and then you're going to follow the unit and the officers. Okay. In the Revolution, there are two types of service records. One is the unit record, and then another is an individual record. Okay, and so this is the example of a unit record that has the information. Okay, and so this is going to tell you when they're discharged, what they were paid. They're compensated for miles traveled. I remember one ancestor I calculated he traveled 2,000 miles. Their wages, their rations, provisions, and then a signature. There are a lot of genealogists that will collect these signatures so that they can identify the person. So one of the problems when you do military research is someone will think that they had the only ancestor named John's Adams, and then you find there's 50 John Adams, and they say, well, no, my answer is the John Adams. But these little clues help you to separate the individual. I have a friend, Sandra Brimhall, and she had 3 ancestors, all with the same, they were in the same county. She only had 1 ancestor in the county, but there were 3 individuals with the same name, and people kept merging them in together. And she had to find evidence about which ancestor was hers that lived and didn't die, whereas the others had died. Okay, so compiled records are created to organize and access information. And so this is, again, these are the compiled records. This is what it will look like on the outside. And then in the Revolutionary War, then this is what it will look, just similar to what we just got through talking about. A payroll, a muster. But one of the important things to look at is they'll start out in the state records, but then they became a continental line unit. Okay, so you're going to want to look for that. Okay. Okay. So, let's see. This little card I have circled over here, it says he was on guard. These little pieces of information, again, will help you to identify who they are and where they are. Often I've gone in and I found out that one person died, and that wasn't the soldier of this family. And that's how we were able to separate the individuals. Okay, in addition to the regular Army, there are a lot of volunteer units, and those are going to be in the state and the county records. Okay, now we're going to just move on to post-service records. Okay. The records of veterans' benefits and who the people he served with and who he is associated with will occur after he was released from the military. And then often military men created groups to keep in touch with their buddies, and they would write unit histories. They would keep in touch with each other. And so these post-service records, there are pensions, there's land warrants, and there's lineage organizations. And so we're going to just talk about this. Soldiers could receive federal benefits, and they could receive state benefits, but you got to check them both because they're going to cash in on wherever they can get it. The very first, because there were so many soldiers after the Civil War, the very first benefits were for prosthetics. And then as there were more soldiers that died and they realized the need, then they started giving the money out. But another thing that they gave was land, okay? And then another was that they gave cemetery records as little honors for these cemetery headstones that could be applied. So there's a national cemetery database that you should check to be able to see if they're there. Another thing is soldier, and these will be locally. You'll want to look for those, see where they would die and see if they are. And these had great records that you will find in those. Okay, so now we're going to move on to land grants. Okay, land grants, how much they could get changed. Okay, but you have to remember the last Civil War pension was paid out in the 1990s. And as more soldiers died, they were paid more money. And so sometimes at first they didn't apply for a pension with the first pension benefits. But boy, when that widow is getting really, really old, and they say, the family says, hey, let's get that check coming in. So don't confine your mind just to one period of time. Bounty land was the same way. Soldiers could say, oh yeah, I'll take a bounty land warrant, and then they started giving more bounty land warrants, and so they may make a second or a third claim. And bounty land warrants, it's kind of interesting because some of them would be filled with pension files, but many bounty land warrants were not filmed with pension files. And there's not a complete index of all bounty land warrants. And so some of them you're going to have to order from NARA. They haven't been microfilmed or digitized, but you need to check these several different databases. So in these bounty land or pensions, the vets had to prove they were entitled to benefits, and so they had to take certain steps. And the names of the documents varied for the different wars, but the information really is kind of essentially the same. The first step they had to do is they had to apply, they had to name which act of Congress they're applying for. And if they applied again later, they would have to do the same papers. And so when you go into a pension or a bounty land, sometimes you'll see duplicate stories that are being repeated. But sometimes, for example, there was one period when they had a questionnaire they had to fill out, and that may have more information than the other. So you need to go through the whole thing. In there, they had to prove they served, they had to prove their age, they had to prove if they had a disability or relationship to wives or children. And so those are the kind of information they're wanting to collect. The second thing, the War Department furnished a report of the soldier's service, which was then sent back to that pension office. And then the pension board would approve or deny. Now, I want to let you know that if a pension was disproved, there's a whole list of pensions that were applied for, but they weren't approved, okay? So, for example, a woman applies, but they find out she remarried after her husband died, and they'll reject it. So you need to look for that, okay? Look through that database also. Step 4, so the pension will be issued, the person will be paid, put on the pension rolls, and he's receiving pensions. But then Congress would send out a new amount of money they're going to give, and they would have to reapply. And then finally, when they died, they would have a drop report which indicates the pension stopped and where that pension was being set, and that gives you a place of death. Okay. So after the soldier died, his widow would then have to apply again for her support. And then this one, she may have her children, she may have her marriage record, may have other documents that will be in that one. Okay, and then a declaration for a widow's pension was filed. There are all these documents and affidavits they would have to do, and you have to look at the affidavits because these are people that have known your relatives throughout their life or a period of time. And so if you reach out to the fan club, you can find out more information about how your ancestor got from point A to point B. So this is a database. This is Ancestry's Bounty Land Warrants. And again, as I said, not all bounty land warrants will be in this database, okay? And you can search it. I'm going to show you, I searched for Fallon, but his didn't come up in here. This is an example of Fold 3, one of their pensions. And is what these were done is a warrant is like a piece of money. And the soldier could use it to buy land, or the soldier could sell that warrant to somebody else who's going out west, or give it to his children. And often these warrants weren't used by the individual themselves, but they were sold. There were actually groups of people that would go around and buy up soldiers' warrants to use. Okay, but it kind of gives you the information of where they are when they received the warrant. So this is Fold 3. This is the War of 1812 pension files. The reason I'm telling you about this is it is 88% complete. They stopped digitizing this collection during COVID, and now they're revving back up. If you go in and check the site, so last time I checked, it was 1,200, and it was still 88% complete. This is a huge collection, and they started at the very first pensions, and then they're filing through to the last pensions. And so some people will say, well, I'll just wait till mine is digitized, but understand this can take a long time, and it might be worth it to go ahead and order it from somebody to go into the National Archives and go ahead and make a copy of it. Fold 3 is kind of a quirky thing. This pension file is, because it's free to anybody, you don't have to join Fold 3 or be a member or pay money to access. This is a free collection. And so it seems like I have trouble finding it, and that's why my handout is important, or that military record website, to use that link to be able to get into it. But on Fold 3, they have how to search the records, and what they do is they will have you click on which war it is, and then they will go ahead and have a list of what records will pertain to that war. Okay, so this is Fold 3, how much he's paid, a statement by the sisters showing they knew which war he served in. Okay, this is proofs showing that their marriage of their second son, John Addington, in May of 1808. So now you know there was a second son. You knew when he married, you knew when the son got married. There's just a lot of information that is in these documents that you want to look for. This is my family, Fleet Fallon. He included a copy of the family Bible record to prove his birth year. He had a copy of another family Bible record that proved his death. And those Bible records had extended family members on it. He had a statement that he was born in North Carolina, Virginia, and that told when he moved to Georgia. Okay, Bounty Land Pensions. This is a very, very valuable website. It is the Bureau of Land Management. So those warrants were used to purchase land, okay? And so this is what, when you go in to search the documents, you can filter it and the warrants. And I just put in a surname and I start with the state, and then you can limit it to county. This tells you when your ancestor arrived, and it tells you how much land he got as he used it up. This is an example of the next page. So this shows all of the Huckabees that arrived. So these could be brothers, these could be fathers, these could be family members. When they settle close together, then you start looking on the far right-hand side. You can see how this is the county where these people are filing. There's something that's called the push-pull. Something is pushing a person out of an area and it's pulling them into something else. We're going to click on this little image here, okay, and see what comes up. This one, it says Hannah Huckabee, widow of Hope H. Huckabee, deceased, a private, a captain in Stewart's Company, 1st Regiment, Georgia Militia, Creek War. Wow. That gave me a lot of information right there of where to start looking for records. It showed that which regiment he is in. He was in the Georgia Militia. Again, this is going to be a state record. It won't be a federal record. But he received this land grant, this land warrant, because of his military service. I am always so surprised when I come in here to see the number of people that are not in those other databases, and it opens up to where they are and what they did. Okay, so there are soldiers in the census records. 1880 was really unique because all the soldiers were listed in their home district if they were in service. Okay. The 1900 and 1910 federal census had a special enumeration of people who were serving, okay? So you don't want to skip that, okay? If these, it will give the company, the troop, the rank, and their residence at home, okay? Here's another census, okay, that helped you to identify veterans and pensioners in 1840. And you'd think 1840, that's before the Civil War. But it said, were these soldiers, did they serve in the Revolution? Did they serve in the Indian Wars? And that was a huge clue to me that told me that Fleet Fallon might have a pension. He might have a land warrant. The 1890 and the 1810 had a special column. As you remember, the 1890 burn. So there were state veteran censuses that showed where they lived in 1841. And so you go into the state records and it'll show you where they were and what they served. These states also had a census of pensioners. Who's going to claim their money? They had to do surveys. They had to find out where their veterans were. In 1890, not all of them survived, but there are some states where this special part of the census survived. And in these schedules, they had a special form, and it tells when their dates of enlistment and discharge and service occurred. And so checking if your state is one of the states that had that supplemental schedule that asked these information for them. Okay, so this is what the National Archive Veterans Help is. They love genealogists because we are the reason that they keep getting money, all right? And this is where you may have to request certain information from them. Don't be afraid to do that. Go ahead and check that out. They have a lot of indexes and they have a lot of records, and they are pulling a lot of their collections off of Fold 3 and putting them into their website. So you want to check and what they have. Another thing that's available at NARA is our articles about the war and the war records, because this is what their expertise at. And so they'll explain collections, they'll explain who's in the collection, they'll explain how a collection is organized, the type of records. So for example, if you want to see a copy of the physical because your ancestor was in a military hospital, this is how you would go in and they would tell you how to request that type of information and get it, okay? So this is a little clipping that explains how they have some of their collections that are on the different websites. So some of them are on Fold3, and some of them are in Ancestry, some of them are in Family Search, and then they have other partner sites. And I kind of went, other partner sites, and there are certain groups such as people who are ship or Navy or things, and they have their own websites where they are posting these National Archive records. Oh. Excuse me. Okay. Jerry, it's 11 o'clock, but I'm just wondering if I should go ahead and keep on going, or if we could go over just a few more minutes.
Let's go ahead and go a few more minutes. We got a late start. Yeah.
Yeah, because we got a little bit of a late start.
Okay, all right. So in NARA, there are records, some of them are organized by units, but they have indexes of soldiers that are listed by name. And then you'll have to either go in and find that document or write for that document, or else you can hire a person to go in and research it. I found it's almost the same price. It's the same price to hire a professional genealogist in the Washington area, or if it's another archive, to just go in and pull the records. And there are people, that's just how they make their living, is just going in and pulling these documents for you. But I can tell you it will be faster, usually, than ordering it through the archive. These are some of the collections that I have ordered things from. There are a ton of war photos, especially the Civil War, but don't rule out World War II, World War I. For the Civil War, they have officers mostly, both Confederate and Union. But they have battles, and so if your ancestor was in a certain battle, you may have a photo of your ancestor's unit at a certain battle. And so I just want to share this one with you. Was helping an individual. We identified that his ancestor was in the Confederacy among the group that were shooting at Fort Sumter. And so they have a photo of a unit that is shooting at Fort Sumter. Now, I don't know that his ancestor is in this photo, but his family was so excited to see this, to kind of make it real, where his ancestor would be. These are pictures of wounded Confederate soldiers at a certain place in a certain time, and your ancestor may be there. This is the Battle of Spotsylvania, and if your ancestor was wounded, this scene may be, and it just makes it come alive. These are photos of the prisoner camps, the hospitals, and you can go in and you can find these kind of things. Okay, so this is NARA's links to the pensions. This is, you go on, it'll show you where to go. I'm just going to show you some of the NARA things. There's case files of disapproved pensions, case files of disapproved pensions of widows and dependents, case files of veterans who served in Army and Navy in Civil War and the War with Spain. Now I want to talk just quickly about veterans organizations and lineage societies, and I won't spend a lot of time. I gave another lecture at BYU, and I think also here in UV Tag, about using these websites. These are so valuable. I am sad that not everybody knows about the Patriot and the Ancestors database. The idea behind this is, don't redo somebody else's work. go ahead and put your ancestor's name. And also, there are a descendants database at the DAR. And you may find that your great-grandmother was a descendant of, somebody, or her aunt or somebody, and they could be named in the descendants database. But we're going to talk about the ancestor database. So what they'll do is this is Philip Huckabee, and it says, oh, there were problems with verified paper. Remember how I talked about how one of the problems is everyone thinks that John Adams is their John Adams. And so they have professionals who have gone through and sorted out all of these problems. You can actually ask the DAR library and researchers to write you a report that will explain all the papers, all the documents, all the databases that they have looked through and their conclusions that they have made about your ancestor, and how they have eliminated certain children or wives or separated two people in that. Then the next page, if we went ahead and clicked below, you'll see these are papers that have been submitted over time, and they're supporting documents that are available. And you can purchase them for $10. You can purchase all the documents that they have used to prove this ancestor or the reasoning or what it is. This is also the lineage that I talked about, how these people are related and their birthdays and death dates. And you'll have pieces of information you can go on. Okay, so these are applications. This shows how each piece of this information is proved. And what is it that they use to prove all of these pieces of information for these family members. This is the next page. It names all of the family. This was really valuable to me because I would run into Elizabeth Moore, and I had no idea that she was the wife of John. He died, and she went on, and so then I realized that these were documents for family. So someone sat down and put this family together, and this little piece of clue. At the top, there is information about what type of documents they use to prove these different things. Okay, and then they'll tell you their service and when they served and what they served. Sons of the American Revolution, I have to brag on them. They have really stepped up. They have databases now that have come online and they have training videos on researching that are excellent. And so if you're looking for a patriot, go there. Okay, so just want to conclude. We sometimes get discouraged. And so this is in Nara, there was a fire and it burned all of the World War records from the 1912 to 1916, 80% in the Army and a lot of the Air Force. And so when I sent for my father and my grandfather's military records, it said they didn't exist. But go ahead and poke in these other places, in these other records, and keep looking, because you don't know what adventure you're going to discover as you're going forward. And I just have to testify that these are amazing stories. And just with Veterans Day ahead, it deepens your respect and your value for what it really means to be a veteran, in addition to being part of a family of people who served, who gave their lives, gave their time for your country. All right, I'm going to sign off, and I'll see you again in a few minutes.
Marilyn, there's one question from Facebook.
Okay.
I put it in the chat there. He says, can you please summarize which site, I guess he means Ancestry, Family Search, and Full 3, which of those sites which are the best main type of military records you can get at each of those sites?
Summarize which is the best site. My favorite site is the military record website that has the links to all of them. And so that's kind of like saying, do I want meat, potatoes, or gravy? All of them are tools. Each of them have their weaknesses. Each of them have their blind spots. And so I use all of them. Okay.
Okay.
But
Thank you.
in the next hour, I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit more about the website of the military links, how it goes to the state sites. And that is kind of where I start, because they have itemized the different databases that are available from the different sites. Okay? All right.
Well, thank you so much, Marilyn. I always say my favorite site is the one where I found it.
Yeah.
And it may not be the same site twice.
Oh, Gloria. I love it. I know. GenWeb. I keep saying, oh, have you discovered GenWeb? I love GenWeb. But then next time I go to GenWeb, there's nothing. And that's not my favorite anymore. So.
It's county by county. So it's, some counties, their records survive and there's plenty of participants, and some
are
their records didn't survive, or nobody's running the website much.
Nobody's running the website. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, there's folks, I have to say to all those who are listening or who will be listening to this, that if you can't find something in this presentation that you haven't checked already, you're not trying.
There we go.
Jerry and I have been doing a bunch of military research recently. I'm researching my father, and he's searching his father. And
you're having adventures.
Yeah, it's great. You can't decide what you can't find.
Okay.
I just think to myself, I wish I could just Google this and find it. And one day I just did that. I just put it in Google. I didn't go to any of these specialty sites. I found exactly what I wanted. So don't forget about trying that. You just never know. So anyway,
that's the truth.
We're grateful. And Marilyn is going to be here for the second hour class, which will focus more in on the state and local records. And so we hope to see you there. Those who are on Zoom can stay right where you are. For those on Facebook, we're going to have to restart a new session on there. And so we'll be back with you in about 5 to 7 minutes, and with the second presentation for today, also by Marilyn. Thank you, and we'll see you soon.